Down now. Hey. You know what it is? You know what time it is? It's time for this week's episode of Keep It Moving. So what is Keep It Moving all about? Keep It Moving is all about inspiring, motivating, encouraging, and empower people to take ownership over their life so they can live a life that's full of purpose, passion, and meaning. Excuse me, I've been fighting this cough for about 3 weeks now. Every week I like to start off with a little chit chat, but I'm gonna keep the chit chat real small this week, because I think the topic that we're going to be discussing is deep, and it's going to be, enlightening to a lot of people. It's going to confirm some things to others, but then it's also going to be an eye opener to other people. So over the last couple of weeks, I was kind of digging in a little bit about this Serena Williams issue, but also the cat that got killed in Dallas. And I've listened to a lot of commentary, and for us in the Black community, right, it's not uncommon, or we weren't really surprised that they started a smear campaign with the guy in Dallas. I was frustrated with Serena because here she is, she's fighting the stigma about women and equality. And I heard a lot of people talking about, hey, he was doing this, or, men do this and men do that. And it's the same thing. There's this topic going on now, even with Kaepernick still. There was a couple of Dolphin players who kneeled. Shout out to the Miami Dolphins for that, because I'm in Miami. And so I started this show with the motive of inspiring. But what's really starting to happen, and sometimes you just got to be flexible in your approach to things, is slowly starting to turn towards more of a social commentary type deal. I'm passionate about certain things, and in order for me to be authentic and be the person that I'm, inspired, hopefully inspiring you to be, and I have to start touching on issues, man, that are really important to me and that I'm very passionate about. And one of those things is race. Now, some of you may know, some of you may not know. I'm half Black, half white. I grew up in the foothills and the mountains of North Carolina. When I grew up, the high school I went to, I think the most Blacks we had at one time was like 32. Marinate on that. We were a class, we were a high school of over 1,000 students. And the most Blacks that we had at one time was like 32. That was it. My graduating class of about 250, 300 people, we had a total of 8 or 9, and 3 of us were mixed. So I'm not sure if it was 5.5 or, 275.5 white people or 5.5 Black people, or if it was 270 white people and 9 Black people. I'm not real sure. But I do know this: whenever we had to write down our race, there was no option of other, all right? Mm-hmm. Or there was no multi-answer option. So one of the things I used to do when I was growing up, when we used to take the SAT or, the little California achievement test and all this other stuff, was I always raised my hand. Well, what do I put down? Because all it showed on the list was, white, Black, maybe, 2 or 3 other little races, and that was it. So I always rose my hand. Hey, what do I put down? Do I put down white or Black? And you'd be surprised that damn near every teacher told me, put down Black. Not one of them ever told me to write white. Not one. Even though my mama, she is white as she comes. You call her Snow White, But every time I raised my hand, I did it. Now that I'm thinking about it really out loud, I did that because I was paranoid about the fact that I was mixed, and I knew that I was the only mixed person in the class. So I knew when it came time to put down race, because they give out the instruction, okay, fill out your name. Okay, now go to race and ethnicity, and so I would just, I would turn red, because I just felt like all the eyes were on me, right? So what is Ivan going to put down, So, to kind of beat them to the punch, so to speak, what I'm saying? I went ahead and I would just go ahead and put down or raise my hand and say, hey, what do I put? And, it was rough. It was hard because I didn't know where I fit in a lot of times. But that was okay. So as I got into leadership, and one of the things I always heard was, we've got to work harder. We've got to be better. We can't, the part of the things of the civil rights movement, right? Because, if you look in the Constitution, it said all men were created equal, even though we were a land full of slaves, right? A country full of slaves. So it really wasn't that all men are created equal, because otherwise, why do you have those additional amendments so we can abolish or true up or reconcile back to the founding father's statement of all men are created equal? Did you catch that? I'm not sure if you did, but anyway, all we wanted was to be based or judged on our own merit, not because of the color of our skin.
Right.
But within our own community, we were taught other lessons. We were taught that we had to do things a certain way, and we almost had to have two faces. You hear the term, they're two-faced. Well, most blacks are two-faced. I'm telling you now. There's the face for white America and corporate America, and then there's the face that we share with each other. And so, yeah, we are two-faced. Most of the time, what you see is not what you're really getting, but that's kind of the way we've had to learn how to coexist in this society. So I'm going to stop it there because I want to introduce my guest. So I started this show back in February, I believe it is. So here we are, September. What's that? February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Hey, 8 months now. And my first guest was my guest today, Chad Bumgarner. Now, Chad didn't know this at the time, but I had always admired him from afar. He was always someone that just had, that great charisma, great personality. People just naturally gravitated towards him. He was always very friendly, very open, very polite, very respectful. And he had a great sense of himself. And that caught my attention even at a young age. So told you, excuse me. So Chad went on and wrote several books, which really blew me away, right? Because I've always wanted to be an author myself. And here's my plug. See how I did that too? That was cool.
I like that.
So my book, Boot Camp for Personal Success, you can find it on Amazon, or you can get the ebook version on my website at www.ivanhunt.com.
What does it look like, Ivan?
Huh?
What does it look like?
Man, don't you know, I had the thing with me and I was sitting here been searching for the last 10 minutes.
You
don't
have
a clue where my daggone book is, man. I cannot believe this. Cannot believe this. Don't even have a copy of my book.
They keep selling. You can't hold on to them.
Hey, that's what's happened, boy. They're selling like hot cakes. But, Chad is the CEO and president of CDB Consulting Group. And he's also a 3-time author. He's a motivational speaker, leadership development coach, and team building trainer. And so I'm really excited about having Chad back on the show again. And we've also partnered up, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about that, because we've also partnered up on another podcast that we both are a part of, but he's the kind of the creative genius behind it. And so I want him to talk about that as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest to you this week. His name is Chad Bumgarner, and we're going to talk about race and leadership. So, Chad, what's up?
What's going on, partner? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So let's start off with the podcast first. Let's kind of bring that out into the open in the early part of the show.
Okay. The podcast is about 6 or 7 weeks old now, and it's called Our Voice.
Okay, go
Our
ahead.
Voice 360. And I came up with that name because I wanted a podcast that covered several topics, if you will, that we're all interested in, but at the same time cover them from our perspective. You have motivation with Mike, and you've got a little bit of Black history with Mike. You have me coming in with the leadership business tips. We got my man Ivan Hunt, who anchors the whole show with his self-help motivation. We got Pete Hunt with the sports guru, giving all the sports updates and his intake on certain things in the sports world that's going on. And then we have our very own, the voice of Hickory, North Carolina, Miss Fentress Chestnut, who brings the news from a Black perspective. Now, we've worked really hard trying to put this podcast together. And I wanted to do it again, several different topics that we all, sports, entertainment, news, motivation, history, but from our perspective. And just because we have an entirely Black cast doesn't mean it's a Black podcast. It just gives you information where normally you wouldn't regularly get it. So we really take time on these podcasts to bring pertinent, relevant, factual information that we all need to know, not just us as African Americans, but we all Americans by African descent, as you like to say, but we all need to know. You know what I mean? So very proud of the podcast and all the members who put out great content on it every week. And I'm really looking forward to pushing it out there and more people paying attention to it and really getting something out of it. So Our Voice 360, you can get it on our YouTube channel, Our Voice 360. It's on Facebook, on our Facebook page, Our Voice 360. Also on Google Play and what else? There's something else. iTunes. So the platforms are going to start to unravel. We're going to start to cover more platforms, but those are the ones for right now. And so anybody watching this video or coming back to play it, please check it out. I think you'll get some information that you'll be interested in hearing.
Cool. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of that podcast. And I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
So like I said, man, when I first started the show, you were our first guest. You were my first guest on the show. And I thought we had a great conversation about leadership.
Yeah.
You and I have talked offline multiple times, obviously. And, we were discussing another venture I was thinking about doing called Ivan Unleashed, where I was going to talk about hotbed topics where I normally stayed away from. And you and I have had some very engaging conversations about race in general, plus leadership, because we both been in leadership and we both are leaders by nature. That's just who we are as individuals. And so I wanted to bring that to the forefront today in this conversation. So what has been your experience then, being a Black man in leadership in corporate America?
The challenge that I face in corporate America as far as leadership, and I'm sure many other people of color face, is the fact that we have to wear two masks and fight two fronts. And what I mean by that with the mask is when you're in corporate America, you're not going to speak and act in a way that you would if you're at home or if you're with some buddies at the bar that look like you. Right. You know what I mean? And also, when you're in a position when you're climbing that corporate ladder, you're really working hard to please the powers that be, the ones that are above you. So then we run the risk of people of color that are in power. Either they're going to really work hard to be successful and also pull some other people up to be successful, or they're going to have the mind frame of, well, I got mine, you got to get yours.
Right.
I'm not pulling you up. And it's like, why is he acting brand new now that he's up here? Now he doesn't know us or she doesn't know us. And I've experienced that several times. It just depends on if you allow that position to get to your head, how you turn out as a leader in that position. And I've seen them on both fronts. I've seen people of color that rise in the ranks and then they look down and they help some other people. Like, this is how you get to this level. Because a lot of times when we're in corporate America, we don't get the help that others may get as far as, trying to climb that ladder. One important thing I would suggest to people of color who are trying to climb that ladder is find a mentor. You know what I'm saying? That's where you are or higher. And that's one of the things we don't do when we're working and we're trying to get promoted and advance. And they don't tell you either, especially if they don't want you to know.
Okay, let's two things, man. Yeah. I'm about to slice the pie all the way up, right? We're gonna pull back all the onions. So I've noticed one thing already, right? You say people of color, and that's one of the stigmas, that's been placed upon us, right? That we can't really just come out and say, well, us as Blacks, we got to act a certain way. We're Black in corporate America, but we got to kind of be inclusive so as to not to offend, right? Because we're almost ashamed of saying Black. You know what I mean? So what we are discussing today really is about what it is to be Black in corporate America. That's right. Really what we're discussing. And when he's referencing they, we're referencing white. I'm just going to put it all the way out there.
That's because
because it's important to be transparent in that regard, and it's not in a derogatory manner. We're not.
Thank you for clearing that up, because that's why I wasn't right. I'm glad you said it, because people that are watching, I don't want them to think that we're being derogatory or being mean. This is basically really real life events. This is how it happens.
Right.
You may not see it as such because you're not a Black person. But this is, again, from a Black person's perspective.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So, yeah, indeed, you're exactly right. And I appreciate you clearing that up. And we have to, when we get in positions of authority, we have to be mindful. And here's the kicker, though. You can't be in a position of authority as a Black person and be stern, because then you're looked at as the angry Black man, or for women, it's worse, the angry Black woman. And now nobody wants to work with you, or there's murmur at the cooler about how she is or how he is or he's this. But now if your white counterpart in the same position, if he's stern or strict, I like him. He's gutsy. He calls it like it is. He's tough as nails.
Yeah, he's a
strong leader. Yeah. But when we do it, man, he's violent. He's loud. He's aggressive.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's just I'm of a different hue, so now I'm painted in a different way. And it's not fair, but that's what it is. And another thing, real quick, Alvin, is it's unfair to Blacks that are in corporate America that have to carry the weight of their entire race on their shoulders in a corporate environment. Case in point, if I walk into a meeting and there's majority white people in there, or if I walk into an event and there's majority white people there, I know I have to act and be a certain way, because they're going to look at me and judge all Black people as being the same way. But let me just do that. It's not fair.
But let me stop you there. Mm-hmm. Now, how much of that is our own limiting belief or our own cognizance of our color, right? Because I have the same temperament sometimes. So when I walk into a room, and we talked about this the other day, the fact that I live in Miami, and it's a heavily Hispanic population, right? But in my mind, I'm Black. I'm mixed, but I identify more with being Black. So when I walk into a room full of Hispanics, they all have my same skin color, right? They have the same hair texture and all these other things. I'm walking in that room looking through the eyes of me being Black. They see me as one of their own. So I get this discomfort, right? Because I know.
You open your mouth.
Correct. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother subject too, right? Then they realize, oh, he's not Hispanic,
Right.
and then my perception was correct. See, I am different, right? But how much of that really is our own belief that we are different versus what real reality possibly could be?
Well, if you think about it, Ivan, that is reality, because no matter what type of society you've grown up in, color plays a major role, and you're taught certain things about color as you grow up. So you got to remember, as an adult, all these things have been taught to us. So it takes some time to unbelieve or unthink what you've been taught. And some things are still in the back of your mind. It's just like breathing. It just comes out. So when I walk into an environment and it's predominantly white, I'm automatically thinking, okay, I got to be a certain way in this area. I can't be me. You know what I mean? Because they might take it a different way than what it really should be. You know what I'm saying? Because they've been brought up to believe certain things. Now, as adults, we kind of start to learn things differently, and we have opinions and feelings and thoughts, and we start the process. And now we're able as adults to start thinking differently and have a more open mind and try to progress or evolve as better human beings. But there's some, you still have the stigmatism in the mind. And it's just like one false move is like, I knew they were like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's a lot of pressure, and it's not fair, but it's the burden that we as Black people have to carry. I've even had a white counterpart ask me some things about Black people. And he's like, man, you're nothing like a lot of Blacks. I can give you an example. I work from home. I was on a conference call, right? I logged in about 5 minutes early, getting ready for the call. Another guy logs in. Now, in my background, I'm playing classical music. I like classical music. It calms me when I'm stressed. If I'm trying to meet a tight deadline, I got a bunch of people, hit me up wanting this, wanting that. We're talking about projects. I put on classical because it calms me, it allows me to think, and I can get through the day. And I don't, I'm not snapping at people because of the stress.
Right.
And it was a white guy. He logged in and he's like, hey, Chad. I'm like, hey, how you doing, man? He's like, good. He said, is that Bach? I'm like, yeah, I'm playing some Bach in the background. I'm working on some stuff. He's like, wow, I didn't know you listen to Bach. I'm like, first of all, you don't even know me.
True.
You know what I mean? So right there, it already told me that there's a Black guy listening to Bach.
Yeah.
That's uncharacteristic. Why is it?
I thought the same thing too when you told me. I was like, really?
No, but I mean, let's think about it. Black people are just as diverse as white folks.
Correct.
But white folks don't want to take the time to get to know people or get to know blacks. If you get to, I mean, you got black Republicans, you got black Democrats, you got black Southerners, you got black Northerners. They all have different beliefs. You know, you got some blacks that love country music, some love classical,
right?
Some love rap, hip hop. Some black people love to go skiing. I know several black groups out of Atlanta that go take ski trips every year up in Utah and all the other places. Right. So, but that's the thing that they don't see, and they don't take the time to get to know us to understand. So it's like, if we do something and they feel like it's uncharacteristic, like, wow, I didn't know you skydive. I got a buddy of mine, black guy, he skydives. He posts on Facebook all the time. He's big on skydiving. Who'd have thought? But I say all that to say, we're just as diverse as you all are. We're no different. We really aren't. So, I mean, if you open your eyes and try to evolve as a person, you would see that we're the same.
I got a partner of mine that I was in the Army with, brother, and he loves scuba diving. You know, he stays in Texas, but he goes out to the Caribbean, comes down here to Miami, to the Keys, and loves scuba diving. He's the only brother I know that scuba dives. He is. I was like, really? Like, it just never, and we talked a little bit about this, and we're not going to get too far down on that road. But, we were talking about soccer because you're big in soccer and you coach your daughter's soccer team. And we had this conversation about soccer. And, a lot of who we are becoming, we're evolving as a culture, as a people, is based on the exposure that we're starting to get. Whereas our exposure when we were younger, or when I say younger, when our country was in this infinite state, right? And we didn't have technology, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have all these resources of information available to us so readily. We were limited in our exposure of certain things. Football, basketball, track, but now through the internet, we're able to read, right? Because, if you don't want a nigga to know anything, you put it in a book, because that was the whole reason why they didn't want to teach us how to read, so we couldn't figure out these things for ourselves. But now we have that access and we're able to. I had a leader that I worked for, and I, brother, right? And we would have those conversations where, Ivan, we've got to hold ourselves to a different standard. We have to hold, I've had that conversation in this gentleman's office. If you dug in my background far enough, you probably figure out who it is. So I'm not trying to openly blast him. But I remember I got to a point where I just started being me. So I quit wearing my tie. And I did. I just got fed up with it. I got fed up with the whole charade of putting on this front, right? Those two faces we talked about. Said, I'm not doing it no more. This is who I am. Either like me, accept me, or leave me alone. And he eventually said, when do you plan on putting your tie back on? I said, I'm not. He said, yes, you are. I've told you. I've told you. And he obviously, he was somebody I reported to, so I really didn't have much of a choice per se.
Right.
My white counterpart would come to work in jeans, and sometimes would wear the same clothes 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row. I was in a corporate setting, and it was like, man, that's blasphemy almost. Is it not? So how do you mentor someone through a situation like that, where they're reporting to another brother and they're telling you, okay, we're held to a higher standard, but there's clearly the opposite standard, that there's clearly a double standard. How do you mentor somebody through that?
You know what? There's really no silver bullet for that situation, Ivan. To be honest with you, I think what your mentor did was the right thing. You know what I mean? But you have what they call the powers that be. Your white counterpart can get away with that. We cannot. Now, it depends on where you were in your mindset and how young you were. What I'm saying? The older we get, the wiser we get. But if I'm mentoring a young buck fresh out of college, 22, 23, and he's going through this, he's going to be, or she's going to be a bit more rebellious, like fighting the system, like, nah, this is not right. I'm like, you're exactly right. But in this situation, you can either choose to abide by what I'm asking you to do, or you can quit. Because whatever it is that you decide, you're not going to affect the company or this person in a negative fashion. They can replace you.
because it happened probably about not even a year before I resigned.
Mm.
So
It's frustrating.
I had already played the game. I had already played the game, and you know, but that's a whole nother topic. But you know, I just got fed up with the double standards.
Now, I'm not saying you can't fight that, because you can start documenting, going to HR, making sure you have documentation, you know what I'm saying? But then you run the risk of getting the backlash from your white counterpart and the higher ups. You know, now they'll start nitpicking, like, and I've gone through this, I'm telling you what I know. They'll start going through, you know, your time card. Is he on time? Is he punching out on time? How long is his lunch? Oh, he was a minute over on lunch. You know what I'm saying? They'll start nitpicking. They'll start messing with you. You know, then you have to be damn near perfect. They'll start looking at your work. Is his work thorough? He missed this. You know what I'm saying? They'll start looking at that. And then what they'll do is they won't call you in the office and say, hey, Ivan, you're doing a great job. I need you to work on or tighten up on this, this, and this. They won't do that. They'll wait until you have your review. Ivan, you're such a great asset to the team, yada, yada, yada. They'll play you up and then they'll pull out the list. You know, you were late a couple times, and then looks here, you know, you were like a couple minutes late getting back to lunch. All this stuff to see, and that's a whole other thing too. When I mentor people, you know what I'm saying? Start how you want to finish. Right. Don't come in with your best foot and then get lazy. Right. You know, because there's somebody always watching. And my mother always told me growing up, you have to work twice as hard to be just as good. And not to get off on the top. Well, I won't. But back to this. Yeah, they'll start to nitpick and they'll start to bring the stuff out on your review, and then they'll start documenting on you, so then they can say, well, you know what, it's just not working out. And it had nothing to do with your work. Right. It had nothing to do with your performance. It's all because you chose to buck the system. Right. It's all because you chose to bring up your white counterpart with the jeans and you not wearing a tie. Right. And that's a double standard, you know, and I think that's all day, every day. And I believe that, you know, you were touching on it where, you know, we have to work twice as hard. You know, like we can't digress. So if we're going to come in and be the standard, my signature used to be the standard, you know, because if I was the standard, then I'm always going to be good, you know. So, but I also realized that, you know, do I have a choice, therefore, to stay within the system or to buck the system? Here's the deal. This is what I tell young people all the time. If you want to change what you see, then eventually you're going to have to become that change. What I mean by that is, I told this one guy in this one corporate environment that I was in, I said, watch how these young guys come in and get internships in this particular company, then they wind up getting jobs. Now, if you're here long enough, watch what those guys do. In 3 to 5 years, either they will leave and get a higher position, more money, less work, right, or they will start to advance within the company, like overnight. One of the two things is going to happen. Most of us, we get a good job. What do? We stay right there. I got a good job. I am not moving. But some of these guys, when they come in, they already have a plan. I'm going to bust my you-know-what for 3 years because this is a big-time company. Looks good on the resume. I'm going to bust my butt, work nights, weekends, holidays, whatever they need me to do. And then after those 3 years, I'm either going to go to a smaller company with a bigger title and more money, or I'm going to start my own. I told you on the first time I said they will move up. That's not true. Either they'll go to a smaller company and get a bigger title and more money, or they venture out and start their own. It happens every time. Now, is that the interns or is that divisible by race? No, it's the white interns that come in from these colleges. Okay. They already coming in with a plan. Okay. They already know what they're going to do. And now why do you think that's? Why do you think that is? Is that something that you feel or know that? No, I know for a fact. Well, but is that something that they have been taught to do? You understand? So kind of go back to exposure, right? So you know, obviously they have a clear game plan on what it is they want to do. Now, do you think that game plan is a result of a mentor or what? I was about to say, most of the time, when they either go to another business or start their own, they are being mentored by an executive who's either got their own business or got a small business, say, hey, you be a great executive over here. It's all about networking, and that's something we don't do enough of. And I need to be clear on your show real quick when I say pro-Black, because I don't want to turn any white counterparts away. Pro-Black does not mean anti-white. I can't make that more clearer. Pro-Black does not mean anti-white. That just means we as Black people need to work more on working together to get us up to speed to where most of the white counterparts are already at.
Right.
So with that being said, as a Black person in a position of authority, we need to be mentoring these other Blacks coming in, teaching and showing them the game as well, instead of saying, well, I got mine. They can figure it out, for themselves. That's not the way we need to be. And it's like, I'm trying not to go off topic. I'm trying to stay on topic, but I'm in the process of moving. And so I made a conscious effort. Every person that I use in this move, whatever service it is, will be a Black company.
Okay.
Because I'm all about trying to work with other Black companies and network. My agent, the general contractor, the lender, everybody, the movers, everybody, the inspection, the appraisal, all of them, Black-owned companies. And all I'm saying is we need to do more of that to bring us up to speed to where our white counterparts are already at. But check this out. I had a director. She was a Black lady. And in her mind, you could tell when she came in the door day one, white was right. Prime example. I was an engineer and I had a white counterpart, right? So we're trying to figure out how best to capture this information from all of our servers and our networks. So I took a couple of weeks and I mapped out the network, servers and everything, put in a nice little chart, Excel sheet or whatever. So it's like, and it was a live sheet to whereas when things changed, it changed on the sheet. So it's real-time information. So I go in, I'm like, hey, you got a second? I want to show you something. I pull this up. I'm like, here's our network. Here's everything that we own, the servers or anything. If you want to pull them up by project or server name or whatever, you can do it. This is what we have. This is what we don't have, blah. She was like, oh, okay, that's nice. That's nice. That's good. I bet. Go back to my desk. My white counterpart was ear hustling. He's like, Chad, I was listening to you talking to, blase in there. He's like, I would like to see it. And me not being smart, I should have protected my work. But I'm like, sure. So I emailed it over to him or gave him the path to pull up on the network. He pulls it up. He puts all the bells and whistles on it, puts color on it and tabs and all this stuff. So the next day he goes to the director, hey, I want to show you something. It's the same thing I just did. He just added some color and some tiles and text and everything. We have a team meeting 2 days later, right? She sings this dude's praises. Look at what John did, just throwing a name out. Look at what John did. See, this is what I'm talking about, people. I need for y'all to think outside the box, how we can capture data, how we can do it without spending thousands of dollars on software. And John figured it out. I need y'all to be more like, and I'm looking at her like, are you serious? I was really looking like, and then I look at John. He couldn't even look me in the eye. I was so pissed. I want to just get out and walk. I did. I really wanted to quit. That was about, I don't know, almost 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I was young then. I wanted to quit. I'm gonna tell you what, I was so mad that when I got off work that day, I was almost in tears because I was so pissed because I worked so hard on that. You know what I'm saying? That was mine. And I had I got a good relationship with my pastor back home in Hickory. So I called him and I said, yo, if it wasn't for this house and my wife and my kid, because I think at that time I only had one child, I cursed. I said, I'd have quit this MF.
Yeah.
And he laughed, but he said, just know that I'm not laughing at you. He said, but I understand your frustration. He said, I do. And we deal with that all the time. And he said, I don't even want to say welcome to the real world, but welcome to the real world.
Yeah, I've had projects that I've worked on and go back and, I submit them even. And all of a sudden, I'll get these corrections. And I'm like, man, there's no way. There's no way that what I submitted that part of it was wrong. There's just no way, and I often wonder, I can never prove it.
Right.
But I've often wondered how many times my files have been altered because we were always on a shared network, right? And shared drive. So you really, it's kind of, unless you password protect everything, it's kind of hard to do. And they like working sheets. So it's really kind of hard to put a password on
live documents. Yeah.
And multiple times, man, I really questioned, if other people were going in and altering my work and me not being aware of it and then submitting it and it get kicked back and go back to, well, Ivan's always bucking the system. So here's the running list of things that he screwed up on this particular project and that project and that project and et cetera. I love your passion, man. And I like the fact that you made a conscious effort to support Black-owned businesses. What do you think is really lacking when it comes to making that type of cognitive decision, right? And within the midst of our overall community, is it that idea that, like Chris Rock said, if it's white, it's all right. Is there's this innate trust built into white companies versus
yes it is, because it is, even with us, because we're taught that directly and subliminally with advertisements on TV, with conversations we have with people in magazines. That stuff, symbols are very important, and people don't understand that symbols matter. You know what I'm saying? So companies will use symbols and colors that mean or equate to trust and reliability. You can trust us. We're reliable. We're dependable. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard because for some reason, with us as Black folks, if a white company comes to us and say, we can do your tile floors or we can do your siding, we don't think twice about their credibility. But when it comes to a Black company and they say the same thing, like, I have to check you out. We do that to our own people. We do that to our own people. And they could be just as credible as the next company. Now, it's a two-edged sword to that, because now you do have some Black companies that are not on the up and up. Customer service is horrible. The work is shoddy. The people are not dependable. I've gone through that too. Right. I've gone through that too. I was getting my wood floor put in, and I hired a Black contractor. He was terrible. On the first day of work, I had to go pick him up.
That should have been a clear thing right there.
Red flag off the rip. Yeah. A couple days later, I had to take him to go get his tool. Oh, they're at my ex's house. Can you take me over to my ex's house? So there's that side of it too. But we just have to do better as a people all the way around. But still, it won't deter me from still going out trying to find other Black companies, because there are some good Black companies out there that do great work just as good as the white counterparts. You know what I'm saying? It's just hard because a lot of times they don't have the resources to really put their name out there like the white counterparts.
Yeah, the smaller masses of people,
right?
There's 240 million, whites, give or take, and there's 17, 18, whatever that magic number is, just as a hypothetical.
Exactly.
What would be? Let's talk about hiring for a second. We kind of touched on this. I know when one administration that I worked for at a facility I was at, I was very proud of, and I thought it was very, very. I remember I even put a post up on Martin Luther King Day because I was going to work, and the CEO was half Hispanic, half Black, gay. The CFO was Black. The COO was a white woman with a mixed child. The CNO was Jewish, and here I was kind of right underneath the CFO and mixed, and I thought to myself, like, wow, that's really amazing that the administration for this executive team is this diverse. I've gone to facilities where healthcare facilities where all the executive team were women, and just women, period. And it stayed that way, like through a couple of, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Do you think that executive teams are strategically picked to be diversified, or is it, I forgot, was it nepotism? Is that the right word? Or is it through nepotism?
I think the smaller companies that have boards are pretty much nepotism, based on nepotism. But larger boards, I would like to believe that they're handpicked for diversity, because studies have shown, man, it's been proven that diverse teams, organizations, boards, whatever, produce more and work better than a team if you got a bunch of all white guys or all white women, or white whatever. If you have a diverse bunch of people, chances are your productivity, your organization, and your business is going to be a lot more lucrative and work a whole lot better. Because think about it, you've got a lot of different ideas, different ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Based upon people's background, experience in school, and so on and so forth. So why wouldn't you want to do that if you're running a company and you want to be prosperous and profitable and productive? Why wouldn't you want that? If you got a bunch of the same, then we're all thinking the same. So nobody's going to catch, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? How do we fix that? Because we're all thinking the same. So we're going to miss a lot. You know what I mean? But if we have a diverse, it's like having a safety net, because now you've got thoughts and ideas coming from everywhere. So now when we put a product out, we've thought it through, completely. So now we put a product out and we introduce it to the world and we explain it. Well, what about, we thought about that, and this is how we, solve that matter. Well, what about, we thought about that. So, I mean, you can't beat it. It's almost bulletproof.
Right. Now, I know, and I don't want you to get yourself in any kind of trouble with where I'm about to go with this, but, my first hire was a black guy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember, of course, we still stay in touch with each other. And I was told not to hire him. And I had interviewed several people. I was on the verge of hiring somebody. And, this guy kind of showed up. Somebody told me, say, look, just give him a chance. Just interview him. Just interview him. I was like, okay. The dude was cocky as he could be. He had, he sat through my interview. Then we were going to have a follow-up interview with a presentation, because I needed to know what his Excel skills were, so forth. And we were going to be sitting in front of the CEO. And I told him not to change anything. Get to that interview, and he's changed the complete thing, the whole thing. So I'm already giving the CEO the handout of what, his presentation is going to be about. He come, yeah, man, and I thought to myself, bro, man, you're killing me. After the interview, my CEO told me, don't hire him. And I said, nah, I said, there's something about him. I see a leader in him, and there was a part of me, I won't say that felt a sense of obligation, but there was a part of me that was hoping to have the opportunity, right?
To prove everybody wrong.
Well, not just that, but to create an opportunity for a young brother. And it just so happened that he presented himself at the very end of the interview process. And so it was almost like, okay, I can connect with this guy. I know how to break him down, lack of a better term. I know how to get to him to where I can mentor him. But I also noticed amongst other people too, and I've mentioned this on the show a while back, that be careful who you hire, right? Because your heart will betray you. Your eyes may see diversity, but you're going to hire based on your heart and what you're connected and comfortable with. And a lot of times, if you really want to know what people's real intentions are, you look at their staffs, you look at who they hire, because there's going to be a trend. There's going to be a hiring trend. And
that's true.
And I have picked up on people who I may have thought were maybe a little bit socially acceptable, you know what I mean, or inclusive, but based on their hiring practices, they just kept hiring the same type of person over and over and over and over and over again. So what it kind of told me was, well, you're not quite as inclusive as you're portraying. How much of that do you believe is to be true?
Overwhelmingly. Overwhelmingly, yeah. I mean, you struck the nail right on the head, man. if you want to see how diverse or how that person thinks, look at his or her staff. That you're right. That tells you a lot. It tells you if they want a bunch of yes people. It tells you if they want a bunch of robots. Because now you also got to look at, do you have leaders that want their hands on everything all the time? They're control freaks, or do you have leaders that are pretty much nonchalant and trust and empower their people to make the right decisions and do the right things, so that you as a leader can focus on other things? So that's something to look at too. But yeah, a lot of times, man, if you really want to get into the mind of the hiring personnel or the person, yeah, the staff will tell you everything. And it could be that if you look around and you see nobody looks like you, he might or she might be getting pressure saying, hey, we got to have some diversity in here.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't want to say you're the token, but
I've actually gone to somebody and I've done this myself. I've had that conversation. Like, look, I know somebody, we had an opening, and I won't say where, but there was an opening, and I knew this white guy that I thought would be a good fit for the position. Well, we didn't have any white guys really. There was a lot of diversity. There was a lot of men and women, but they were of different ethnicity groups and racial makeups, right? We didn't have a white guy in the group at the lower level. No, we didn't. And I was like, look, man, hey, I'm just being observant here. I'm just observing. It could easily well be perceived that we're shutting people off. So I just want to go ahead. Go ahead.
Why is that? Because a lot of people will see that. But then now, if you have a white staff, nobody will question it.
Because even though we may be in the position, we don't own the company. We're not on the board of directors or the board of the governors. That's why. So the board of the governors, typically, if you look, I don't care what industry you're in, very, 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 very few will be majority of a minority, right? So the vast majority of boards of directors and board of governors and all these things, they're going to be white or probably Jewish, especially down here in Miami, they're going to be white or Jewish. That's just the way it is. So even though in the forefront, right, if it's a corporation that maybe has 5-6 different entities, within that one individual entity, there may be diversity at the executive level there. But what's not happening, right, is at that upper echelon, at that corporate level, or that's where the lack of diversity takes place. So at the lower level, there may be some diversity in leadership. So that's the level that you have to be very careful about your hiring practices, because it may show that, yeah, we'll just put them out there, right? We're the token. But then at that point, you've got to start being careful about how you hire. That's my belief on why that is. And that's just something I've seen. Hey man, this is something I've looked at a lot, and just got to a point to where you're like, bro, I just can't do this no more, man. For me personally, I just couldn't do it no more, and I just had to make different decisions.
Well, you know what? This kind of goes back to what you asked me a while back when you were saying, how do you mentor somebody, through that situation? I tell a lot of the young people, especially the black men and women, if you don't like what you see, create your own reality. You know what I'm saying? When you go out and you start your business, you start hiring other young brothers and sisters, come in and mentor them and help them understand it, and then you create the environment that you want to see. Because corporate America is not really going to cater to you.
No,
they're not. And if it wasn't for, in my opinion, if it wasn't for, now I can't think of the law that requires you to have people of ethnicity.
I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah. If it wasn't for that law, how many blacks or Latinos would be in positions of management or leadership?
Right.
If it wasn't for that law. Affirmative action.
Yeah. I was just saying that. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have a lot of white people in the world that are really good people. But then you got some that just want to keep to themselves.
And vice versa.
I was about to say, and vice versa, and
Right.
vice versa. But now, but now let's think about this though. We live in the United States of America, right? And the symbol for Lady Justice is Lady Justice holding the scale, right? And it's supposed to be balanced, right?
Mm.
And she got what over her eyes? A blindfold.
Yeah.
So now, if I'm looking at resumes and I'm comparing, I'm looking at credentials. Names should not matter. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Names should not matter.
Yeah.
I'm looking at what have you done? What are you able to do for me? Can I use you? Now, because your name is Kishara,
Mm-hmm.
why does she automatically get put in file 13?
Right.
When she's probably just as qualified, or if not more qualified, than Sarah.
Yeah. And if you're ever in corporate and you start hiring somebody and you post a position and you start getting that influx of resumes, you're going to be hard pressed. I don't care who you are,
Yeah.
to not be judgmental on the whole resume. You're going to see certain names, and so it's going to solicit certain feelings, emotions, or experiences that you've had in the past. It's very difficult to be unbiased, I think, in an interviewing process, at least on the initial phase, right? So when you first get that influx of resumes and you start scanning, name jumps out to you, where they're sending their resume from. You start disqualifying people if if you think, oh, well, they're probably not even going to show up for the interview because they stay 100 miles away, even though they may be perfectly qualified. So I think I think there's a filtering process that goes through that we're all subjective to, and we can't really escape.
That's true. And the thing is, I caught some flack for my daughter's names. Why I named my daughters the way I named them. Now I have 3 girls. My oldest daughter's name is Kari. My middle child's name is Courtney, and then my baby name is Cameron. And I said I just wanted to give them names so they can have a chance in life.
Mm.
I mean, you can hate it or not. I didn't want to create a name. I didn't want to combine me and my wife's name.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I don't like that. That's just me.
Right.
And I didn't do enough study on, African names, if you will, to find one that we liked.
Right.
We just had a conversation and we wrote down names that we liked and didn't like, and we did it from there. But my thing was I wanted to give my kids a fighting chance in life. And I know for a fact, especially being in the corporate world or just being in the United States, period, for them to be able to have a job that they can grow in.
Right. And we'll pause it right there. And I think I agree with you totally, man, about names and race in leadership and how it impacts your leadership style and how it impacts corporations. It's a hard subject to even talk about, even though we both, I know Chad personally, and Chad knows me personally, and I can tell you, you couldn't find 2 people who are more inclusive with a bigger heart than out there. But we're both also very passionate about race relations, and
right.
We've been on both sides. We've been the victor and the victim. We've been victims of racism, but we've also held positions of leadership where, if we so desired, we could have enacted racism. Right? We could have been the judge and jury also, and because we've been on the other side of it, we've impacted and felt racism at such a very young age. Now that we're older and wise and more mature, we're also a lot more open-minded about change and receptive to change, and we understand and we embrace change. But we also understand that we have an ability to choose. So in our own personal time, if we choose to spend our dollars a certain way, that is not reflective of our corporate career and our corporate decisions.
Right.
And I think sometimes even in Black and white communities, whites, they don't have to make that decision. Exactly.
And even if we stop shopping at their stores, they're not going to feel the effect most of the time.
Nike would.
Yeah.
We stopped shopping at Nike, boy. Nike will feel it. I promise you that. You know, even though their shares have gone up, but you know,
Yeah, man.
but
I was thinking about buying some.
Huh?
I was thinking about buying some.
Me too. You know,
Yeah.
but I think that's and I think that's the biggest thing sometimes between trying to understand race a little or certain elements of race is that as minorities, or people of color or Black or Hispanic or Asian, and anything that's not qualified as being white, so to speak, it's really hard I think for white America to really try to grasp the concept of racism and what is,
because they're not used to the back end of it. When you're born and raised as privileged, when you're born and raised as believing that you can do whatever and be whatever and there's no repercussion, when you're born and raised and you're never taught you got to work twice as hard to be just as equal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a different upbringing than the upbringing that we had to endure or live up to. You know what I'm saying? When you go into an environment and that environment doesn't look anything like you, they don't have to deal with that. And then when you some of the whites that you try to have a intellectual conversation with about this, the ones that really have an open mind and really want to learn and understand, they feel so bad about this. I mean, it's not their fault. Right, it's like, I had no idea that you or Blacks even went through that. They don't have to think about that. You know what I'm saying? So when you bring it to their attention, it's like, wow. But now the key thing is, like my grandmother also used to say, when you know better, you should do better.
Right. I agree.
So now as an informed white person, what are you going to do about it going forward? I'm not saying that one white person can change the world. That's not what I'm saying. But now you're more educated on
I disagree with you on that part.
Okay.
One white person can change the world because they're changing their world and those that are impacted by it. So, just by having, they'll never be able to fully understand what it's like. And they just, just like I will never fully understand what it's like to be you, they'll never fully understand what it's like to be me. I won't understand what it's like to be them. You just can't grasp because it's not your reality. It's not your, it's not your existence. But I do think to have the ability to at least be empathetic enough to have the conversation, changes the world because now they have the ability to choose, because their level of awareness has been given. But you said something a while back, and we're right at the end of the show, that I thought was very powerful. And it was about creation, right? That most whites with mentors, they come in as interns. They've got an executive mentoring them. They're showing them how, to move through these little, these paths. And then either they go and they find something at a younger place or a smaller company, or they start their own business.
Right.
One of the biggest things, and I've been listening to Wallace D. Wattles' Science of Getting Rich here lately again. And he said something that really caught my attention. And I was listening to I typed up a Les Brown quote yesterday, and he said something along the same lines. Creation versus competition. One of the things I think that Blacks as a whole are starting to grasp, right, is that wealth is not a competition.
Right.
And that but wealth and getting rich is a manifestation of creation, that you create your own riches and wealth. The best example I can give, and I'm gonna kind of wrap it up off of this, so forgive me for ending the show this way, but if you look at, we'll use cryptocurrency and Bitcoin versus the dollar. Competition says that Bitcoin has a finite number that's ever going to be created, right? What they're doing with that is, one, they're driving up value, so it's almost a monopoly just to begin with. But because it's finite, they're creating a competition. That competition is going to drive up its value, which is ingenious. Whoever created it and thought of it, they're geniuses in that, financial geniuses in that approach. Now let's look at the dollar. the dollar gets created every day. So if there was a limited amount of dollars, then the value of the dollar would go up. Thus, inflation and adjusting the physical policy,
Right.
blah 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 blah. If you're not familiar with what I just said, research it for yourself, and you'll understand. So, wealth creation and creating riches within the Black community and as minorities itself is much more possible than it is competing for this limited or this finite amount of success, if you will. And I was just kind of matching two things that I've been studying this week, and something that you mentioned earlier, and us talking about race relations and leadership and so forth here. We have the ability to create wealth for ourselves. And if you don't take nothing else away from this today, just remember that it's not about competition, it's about creation. And that is where I think one of the biggest disadvantages that we've had for so long, because we've always been taught to compete and not to create. And now we have the ability and the resources and the understanding to know that we can create for ourselves, and we don't have to compete with our white counterparts. With that being said, peace.